friends. Welcome to the One Idea Away podcast. This is Jenny Wiley, Director of Community for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, or iPEC. And I am joined today with Luke, our original host. We are sharing the space today. Luke, we had such an awesome time doing this interview today. It was actually for our Energy Explorer series with iPEC. And so it was so fun sharing the space with you. We interviewed Harpreet Chana, and I was just curious, what stood out for you in the interview that we did with Harpreet?
Yeah, I think this was an interesting one because I think it brought up a couple of topics that, again, we just see as so prevalent out there right now. And as she began to talk about this idea of being functionally unwell, which is sort of that notion of, that she wasn't happy, but she also wasn't unhappy.
Yeah.
It was kind of this weird void that we tend to find ourselves in, that as she was in that space, she had this really powerful moment of something that was deep healing. It was also traumatic almost in that same moment. But it required her to admit, to be very honest with herself at that moment of what was really not well, what was not in alignment with who she really was and how she wanted to show up in the world. And so this conversation really gets at, while we talk about that idea of how do we refine and reconnect to mental balance, part of what is at the heart of that is this idea of being in alignment with self as well. Mm-hmm. And getting back to that place of alignment, or even admitting that we're out of alignment, can be really, really freaking difficult. And I think that's almost some of the anxiety and stress that so many people feel today in today's world, is that sense of, I am out of alignment. And if I'm willing to look at that, or if I do look at that, what are all of the other things that now all of a sudden I might have to address in my life?
Right.
And Harpreet met that with such extraordinary courage and vulnerability. And she talks through all of it with us in this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciated also Harpreet's perspective on how our thoughts are like currency. And this really speaks to the work that she does with her clients now in, really taking a moment to step back and look at, in what way am I investing in the thoughts that are going to yield me the results that I want, and more authentically align me with who I want to be in my life.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because the first time I heard you comment on that as one of your takeaways, and it was something you had brought up as well in the interview itself, is, I think of thoughts as currency, and you describe it so well of what we're investing in and everything else. I also think of currency as an energetic current as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And the way in which our thoughts flow into our life and the charge that energetically creates for us. And so anyway, we get into all of it. Harpreet is a wonderful guest, and thankfully so incredibly vulnerable, as well as an expert in what it is that she does. And I hope everybody enjoys listening to Jenny and I facilitate this chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you on the other side. Welcome, everyone, to our May webinar, Energy Explorer webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about returning to mental balance, from functionally unwell to truly aligned and joyful. We are so grateful that you're sharing this space with us today, whether you're tuning in live or you are watching the replay. My name is Jenny Wiley. I am the Director of Community with iPEC Coaching, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And I have the pleasure of being able to interact with our amazing coach community. At iPEC, our mission is to raise the consciousness of the world one person at a time. And so we do that as certified coaches. But not only are we coaching, we are a community of helpers with really big hearts and amazing stories. So we have this Energy Explorer series where we get to highlight several people who are coaches in our community and learn more about how they're using their purpose and talents and highest selves in order to live in their purpose and truth. So we really want to get to the heart of what it means to be a certified professional coach, especially through iPEC. So if you have questions about the actual iPEC coach training program, we'll have information for you to be able to get aligned with that. But today, we are going to be digging into one of our amazing coaches, Harpreet Chana, and I will be giving her a proper introduction in just a moment. Once again, if you have questions today in our Zoom room, go ahead and use that Q&A box so that we can see your questions come through. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can add your questions into the comments. And the amazing Jordan running the back end will make sure that we see those questions over here and answer them live. We are joined today by my interviewing partner in crime, Luke Iorio. If you're not already a part of the Luke Iorio fan club, he is the president of iPEC, and he is a dad, a spouse, an entrepreneur, a conscious coach, a blogger, a podcaster, just a really enthusiastic participant in this game of life. And he asks amazing questions and asks what's truly possible. So as the president of iPEC, he is an amazing leader and has helped the company grow. And we get to dive in with him also in our interviews today. And he will help me asking questions of Harpreet as well. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks for having me here, Jenny. Love this.
Awesome. So May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are so honored to have one of our very own special coaches here, Harpreet Chana, here to help share her story and what she is working on currently. To give a little introduction to Harpreet, she is a qualified pharmacist who has held senior national level positions in the UK for the last 8 years. She's also a qualified project manager, certified professional coach, international speaker, trainer, and facilitator. Harpreet is the founder of the Mental Wealth Academy, which helps organizations and individuals to invest in their mental wealth to protect their mental health. She uses her own unique experiences as a healthcare professional and as someone who has struggled with mental health in the past to now help others through focusing on self-leadership, self-regulation, and professional development. And as well as running the academy, she still works at a national level as a pharmacy consultant. Busy lady, but full of heart. Harpreet lives in the middle of the UK with her husband and nearly 6-year-old son. Harpreet, thank you so much for joining us on the Energy Explorer series today.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So Harpreet, when we were preparing for our time together during our interview, you so graciously told us your story of how you came to find coaching and shared your experience of being in this category that we're calling functionally unwell, air quotes. And to me, this feels like when we are just checking the boxes on the outside, but on the inside, it can feel really turbulent and unsettled. So I'd love for you to share with everyone, what you were experiencing on the outside and the inside at that time before you became a coach.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're talking probably going back about 4 years. And I think on the outside, I had a life that most people would be quite envious of. I had, as I said, as you said, a senior national position by the age of 30 in my profession. I lived in a lovely house in London. I had a nice car on the driveway. I had a lovely husband, a son, holidays abroad every year, really busy social life. So on the outside, I looked like the girl who had it all. And, I was a trainer and a speaker. So, I could get up in front of a crowd of 1,000 people and be very, very confident. Life and soul of the party, always really bubbly. That was on the outside. On the inside was a completely different story. And it wasn't something that there wasn't like a trigger or a catalyst that, sort of where these feelings had come from. They'd just crept upon me over a period of time. And what had started off with a little bit of stress at work and not really being able to sleep well at night, over time started to really affect my mood. Mm-hmm. And when I look back on it now, I realise that I kept myself busy because I was keeping myself distracted, because I felt so uncomfortable just being with my own thoughts and just sort of, allowing myself to just be, that I didn't. And I kept myself incredibly busy. I always had music on or noise. I never sat with myself because I knew that I'd start to feel uncomfortable, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what that was. And so for a few years, in fact, I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't happy either. And I didn't quite know what the problem was. And again, instead of really trying to sort of sit with it and figure out what it was, I just kept myself busy on that, what I like to call the hamster wheel of life. And it was very much eat, sleep, work, repeat, eat, sleep, work, repeat. And I looked around and everybody else was eat, sleep, work, repeat on their hamster wheels, because that's what society tells us we should be striving for: the house, the car, the holidays, the social life, and the good standing in the community, all of that stuff. And so that's what I thought was important. And I just didn't feel that I could step away from that and sort of say I had a problem. And so And I think a lot of it was not really wanting to admit it to myself that there was a problem. But the symptoms were there. And you know, you talked about outside versus inside. Whilst I didn't sit with the inside, symptoms like, and this is why I call it the functioning unwell, because it's a term that means I was still very highly functioning, still had the great job and, you know, the busy life. But you could see that, you know, I was struggling to switch off. I was struggling to sleep at night. You know, and some of these functioning unwell might turn to drink most evenings to take the edge off a bad day. We might turn to food. I certainly did, as my comfort. You know, and you know, various other ways that we sort of, you know, try and comfort ourselves through this. But really, it is our mental health is beginning to get affected by whatever it is we're not dealing with. But we make all these coping mechanisms that might not necessarily be the best thing for us. And that was absolutely the case for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that especially now in these times where all of the things that we typically would fill our lives up with, the busyness, the external is gone or in transition and not the same as it was before. A lot of us are looking at this time and saying, wow, this doesn't feel good right now. And I have to slow down and look at this. And so I'm curious, you know, you had told us about what you experienced when you realized I've got to slow down and really start to look at this. Will you tell us about that experience that you had?
Yeah, sure. And I just before I go into my experience, I completely agree with you. I think this time has been absolutely massive in getting people to just stop and look at where they are and really assess and face up to the things that they may have been hiding the way I was. You know, I obviously didn't have a pandemic at the time, but things got so bad for me. And I kind of, there's a couple of things that really stick in my mind. And the first one was I was on the train on the way into work one day on the London Underground, and I just got very teary, and I physically couldn't get myself up. I was coming towards my stop, and I remember thinking, I can't do it today. I can't put my mask on and pretend that everything's okay, because it's not. Yeah. And I remember sitting there, and I had this music in my ears, and I looked at the end of the line, and I thought I could just stay on this train. It'd be the easiest thing. And then I thought, actually, where this train ends, which may not make any sense for people who don't know London, but it was a part of London. I thought, what am I going to do when I get there? So I did. I forced myself to get off the train and carry on that hamster wheel. So, you know, that was one moment absolutely that I remember thinking, I don't think I'm okay. And then I can talk about this openly now, but there was a moment where I ended up on a railway bridge near my house, coming back from the doctor's practice, where I hadn't talked about anything like this, by the way. It was something else unrelated. But I got so upset and I couldn't explain where it was coming from that on this railway bridge, I genuinely thought, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't hear these thoughts, and it's just too much. I can't feel like this anymore. Now, thankfully, I have a really strong anchor in my family, in my husband and my son, and it was enough to make me realize what I was doing. But I look back on that moment now, and I realized it was like a divine intervention. It was like someone was saying to me, you know, you need to experience this so you can help stop others from and prevent others from feeling like this. And I would never want anyone to feel as desperate and in despair as I did that day. And, you know, I really did. And that was in 2016. And in 2017, I walked into a coaching event. It was a free event. I'd seen it advertised on Facebook. I went along not knowing what to expect. And I kid you not, it was almost as if somebody had reached across on the stage and slapped me awake. Because in that moment, I realized so much of what I'd gone through and what I was going through was as a result of what I say to myself and what I think. And actually, I'm not at the effect of life. I'm the architect of my life, and I get to make the decisions and I get to choose. And that for me was like, you know, we talk about raising consciousness. That was the start of my journey of consciousness. It was like a switch had been flicked inside of me, and I thought, oh my God, all this time I thought that there's nothing I can do, that I'm trapped and that I'm stuck in this situation. And actually I'm not. I'm the architect. I get to decide. I've just been scared to make some big decisions. And so I did. And for about a year, I made a few big decisions. I made some choices. We quit London, you know, and I left the job and I started consulting. but I still wasn't, I knew there was something else I wanted to do, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And it was only when I started working with a coach, I'd had counselling and therapy, and that had been fine for what it was, but really I wanted to move forward. And so it was working with a coach that helped me do that. And in the first session, we did a deep dive, and she said to me, Harpreet, you know, you want to really help people, and you want to help them, particularly around mental health. You really should be a coach. You know, I think from what you're telling me, coaching is coming out loud and clear. And I remember thinking, really? I know so many coaches. I'd never thought of myself that way. Really? And, you know, she sort of planted the seed. And it was 2 weeks before Mod 1 was due to start in London, maybe about a week and a half. I came home that day. I'd heard about iPEC from a couple of my friends who were graduates. And I set up the call with the admissions coach, which I'd had a couple of days later. And by the Tuesday, so not even about a week after I'd had that session, within that week, I'd signed up, I'd sorted the finances, and I was in Mod 1 on that Friday. So in the space of 3 days, I'd gone from, you know, signing up to then turning up in London. I dropped everything to do it. And I can't really explain it other than it just felt right. I really went with my intuition at the time, and I just knew that the timing was right for me.
That's beautiful, really inspiring. Luke, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in there on something because, Harpreet, I think one of the things that you tell within your story, which is so critical, and I just don't want to overlook it for anybody, is that point of admitting that idea of being functionally unwell, meaning admitting that there is a challenge here, something is not where it should be, and you recognize kind of the weight of the struggle and the stress of what it was that you were going through. And I'm wondering, where you went from there. Part of it you described, certainly the anchor of your husband and of your son, and yet there are some that level of self-honesty and even vulnerability with self is a tremendous wall that they can't climb over. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, maybe in addition to the way in which you are anchored by your husband, by your son, how were you able to get to that point of not only admitting, but actually then starting to take steps, even though you didn't know where those steps were going to lead at that point? There was something that encouraged you to just keep taking the next step that allowed then this momentum to ultimately take over.
At the time, it was, I had spoken to my doctor, my general practitioner, in advance, and she had sort of said, look, we want to put you on tablets and everything else. And I'd really resisted. As a pharmacist, I knew what those tablets did, and I knew people that were taking them for life. And I thought, I don't want any of that. That day, it was actually my little boy and the thought of my little boy growing up without his mother that made me think, what am I doing? What am I doing? This is insane. And I did, I walked down to the other side and I called my husband at home, and that I now look back and I think, my goodness, he's sitting at his desk at work, and to get that phone call from your wife to say that she's feeling this bad, I can't imagine how he must have been feeling that day. And I do feel really bad about, I put him in that position, but I think I needed to get there, because as I said, it was that, and it was what, he sort of said to me, go home, call your counsellor, and we need to get you some help. And yeah. I sort of, it was that did it. It was hearing it from him. And I realized myself, I thought, my goodness, was I really thinking seriously about it? And I was, genuinely. And I tell that story now when I talk and I do my speaking, and I go into quite a bit of detail because I genuinely did. And so for me, it was the shock of, my goodness, I actually feel this low. I need to do something. And so the big thing for me, I did call my counsellor. I went back to the GP. I went on the tablets. But the big thing for me was I took some time off work. And I never took time off work. Healthcare professionals very generally like that. We just don't, because we look after the sick. And so we can't be sick ourselves. It's a really, it's a big thing actually for those of us that work in the healthcare professions, that, we really do push ourselves beyond where we probably should do. And so for me, taking a few weeks off work, but again, I didn't tell anyone at the time. I just kept it to myself, because I was really worried about what people would think. I was worried about being judged. I thought people would think I was weak, that I couldn't manage a full-time job in a demanding role with a child. And so I didn't tell anyone other than my boss. But those few weeks, I didn't force myself to do anything. I just sort of, I just was myself, and I was just being myself. And I didn't, other than obviously having to care for my son, I didn't force myself to do anything I didn't want to. I now look back on that and I realize that was, again, a really big shift. I think a lot of us force ourselves because, again, it's because of what we're told to do. It's our conditioning, it's society. And so we tell ourselves that this is the way we have to be. So who are we to stick our head above the parapet and say, actually, I don't want this life. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't fulfill me because everybody else is doing it. We just carry on. And in those hamster wheels, I certainly did. And so that was the first part for me, was just allowing myself time, just sit with myself and be comfortable with myself and start to unpick some of the issues that were lying underneath. But as I said, it wasn't long after that I discovered coaching, and that was the real game changer for me.
Just a few things I want to call out, though, in the kind of the entirety of what you just ran through, because there was a lot in there, not just that time off and what it afforded you. The first is certainly when you connect to your son, it immediately connects you to something beyond yourself. That's one of the quickest ways for us to expand our perspective of where we are in life and to actually start thinking of others, which is a really quick way to begin to move out of some of the darker spaces that we can be in. The next thing is, even just being able to speak to your husband, to know who is that kind of trusted resource, or going direct to a counselor or somebody you believe that you can acknowledge, I've got something going on and I need help. And the fact that you then had the time, but it's interesting because, in some respects, there's this wonderful openness, that we experience when we are able to talk about it. But what most people maybe see and have a fear around is that most people, Harpreet, the way that you talk about it very smartly, in the fact that you talk about it retrospectively. You didn't go start telling everybody what you were going through at that moment, because then the social pressure, the social norms that put you into the situation you were feeling in the first place would have roared back up again in all likelihood. And instead you created a little bit of a cocoon, a safe place for you to be able to do the type of work that you needed to do, to get the help that you needed to get at those times, to connect to what was within you, to then bring that back out again, even if that then progressed over the course of time. But I think it's an interesting dialogue, because with the social norms that we end up buying into also creates this extraordinary effect of keeping things in place. And so it's not only looking up, kind of above the water and saying, hey, I don't want this. It's also then knowing that once you realize you don't want this, still feeling a whole lot of people inviting you back to the old way of doing things, because if you change, what does that say about me? Now, do I actually have to look at my own stuff?
Yeah.
That can be a scary thing.
Right. Yeah. The visuals of the hamster wheel and, what comes up for me is kind of like treading water, this checking the boxes and living in a way that is not necessarily what we want, but what we feel like we should do, feels sometimes like we're treading water, and it takes so much energy to tread this water. And it gets to a certain point where you feel like you can't move forward. You can't move back. I can't even go over to the side. I feel like I just have to stay here and tread water to keep my head above water, which for me, it comes up to, I so value having a coach and other trusted people who I can talk to about these things, because they can say, hey, you're treading water and you can just come over here and rest for a little bit if you want. And really ask yourself, do you want to tread this water? And so coaching or asking for help from someone outside of yourself is such an amazing gift that we can give ourselves for our mental health.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. That's couldn't agree more with you. And I still have a coach now, because that is the one thing that really puts that into perspective for me. But I just want to add one thing. When I speak about this, particularly in a corporate environment, I will have probably 2/3 of the room nodding along with me. I have people in tears. I have people staring away, and I know what I'm saying they are experiencing, but they don't talk about it. They don't talk about it, and they don't. And I will see people that are really have been moved to tears, and they're quite upset. And I think, I know something's going on for you, but I never, I would always invite people to come and talk to me afterwards. Some do, mainly women. A lot of the men don't, I'll be honest. But I know that what I've said is hit. And even with the chat, we're not getting any comments. And I guarantee you, of the people that are listening, there will be people that will go, I know exactly what she's talking about. I've been there. I'm there now. I know it. But it's that until we make it okay to be able to say what's going on without fear of judgment or recrimination, there will still be people that keep that to themselves, and they will, as I said, be that functioning unwell. There'll be other coping mechanisms that they employ, but they won't necessarily open up about what's going on and seek the help that they need. Yeah. And I do think that if I'd done that a bit earlier, maybe I wouldn't have ended up where I was. And, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I genuinely think if I was a bit more honest with myself, let alone anyone else, I might not have ended where I did.
I think, Harpreet, just to echo that, only because I've experienced something very similar in you know, individuals that I've spoken to, and then different audiences and things like that. For everybody, honestly, just to echo the importance of this, to hear it. So many individuals right now are going through experiences like this in various degrees, but there is, you know, because of some of the norms of profession and the way we're supposed to make a living and what we're supposed to shoot for in this outer image of success, it's created a lot of, you know, paths that we have chosen that we believe at the time would have led us to happiness. And then we begin to arrive there and we look around and we go, is this it? Kind of unfulfilled. And so there's different experiences of this, different intensities of this. But, you know, just again, to echo what you're saying, Harpreet, I hear the angst of the feeling that you're describing very, very often. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that I'd love to then ask you is, you know, we talk about the phrase that, you know, many I'm sure have heard, certainly sure you have, is that idea of as above, so below, right? And so much of what you were experiencing was from the mental state, from the beliefs that you had and that type of work. So I was wondering if you could describe some of that inner work that you then, you know, was part of the journey that you went on at that point, because that's really the inner journey that facilitated the outer journey you're now on.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say iPEC was an absolutely core part of where I am now. You know, I to Mod 1, and that self-work that I'd done in advance was, as I said, it was more around the actually I'm the one in control, I'm the one that makes the decisions, so understanding the power of thought. And it's actually the first pillar of my mental wealth coaching program is understanding the power of thought, just because in just understanding that alone, you can change so much for yourself just in that one thing. And I'm trivializing it because it's quite big, but you know, it really is. And so I'd done some work on sort of the understanding that I'm the one in control and it's my power of thought and what have you. And as I said, I knew that I was on a different path, but I couldn't quite figure out what that was. For me, walking into LPT, that Mod 1, was life-changing. It had crystallized some of the work I'd done myself and brought it into a way that it made sense to me. And you know, the trainer we had was fantastic, and I just bonded with her straight away as well. And I just went, I get this. My God, this is what I've been searching for, because you're effectively crystallizing everything that I believe and everything that I think and I've learned so far, and actually taking me further. So I think that was really, you know, stepping out of that kind of just where I was and into something that was a completely different, you know, platform to where I had been for that whole time. And then the other key part of it was in Mod 3 and learning all about ELI. Now, I know some coaches don't use ELI a lot in their practice. It's the cornerstone of mine, because I think until you understand how and why you show up day to day, and then what happens to you when you're put under any kind of stress, until you understand that, then you can't do the mental wealth work. That's where it starts. That's, again, it's the core. It's understanding, well, why do I respond in the way that I do? Why do I react in the way that I do? And is this helping me? Is it helpful? And actually, do I want to be this person that's inspired and motivated from a negative place, or actually do I want to try and be much, you know, be in a much more positive space? Mm-hmm. And I can only say from my experience how much it has changed my life from where I was to where I am now. In that the way I see things and the way that I do things completely changed for me.
Yeah. For those who are not already a part of iPEC, ELI that Harpreet is talking about is the Energy Leadership Index, and it's proprietary to iPEC, but it's an understanding of how our thoughts becomes our feelings and becomes our actions as a result, and that we have a variety of different choices that we can make around how we tap into those thoughts and the power of those thoughts to be at conscious choice for how we want to show up in the world. So it really is an incredible tool that we get to use not only for ourselves, but for our clients too.
I think the Harpreet, where you begin in terms of some of that work is the power of your thought and the work that you then did on yourself, of kind of taking yourself through understanding that process and understanding the things that were showing up for you the way that they are. What I just want to add into this for everybody listening is that in that power of thought, one of the very first things that you're going to realize is, I'll say the vast majority, just to be polite, everything that you think has been programmed based on prior experience is the reality of it. So much of what we believe to be our thoughts are, connected to different experiences that we have had in our past. So they're not really truly an objective conscious thought at this moment, unless we can get ourselves fully present in this moment, unless we can get ourselves fully aware of what some of those kind of preconditions, the conditioning that we've experienced, so we can unwind and unwire the types of things that no longer serve us and are no longer creating the types of experiences and outcomes in life that we wish to have. And I guess maybe, I'm curious for, Harpreet, for you, what were a few of those, those inner thoughts and beliefs? What were some of the things that you had to rewire that all of a sudden opened you up to say, wow, look at how much here is possible for me in the playground that I get to play in now?
Oh gosh, so many. And when I said I walked into LPT and it changed, the biggest thing for me was my perception of the truth versus the actual truth. That was the game changer for me, and I talk about it now all the time. And I'm like, really, is that really true? Is that the truth? And I'm like, and I think that was a lot of it. Is when I look back on it now, and I think I told myself and I deprogrammed so much of this. And the thing is, Luke, we don't half all of this is most of it's in our subconscious. Don't even realize it's all pre-programmed, like you say. When we get up in the morning and we check our phones, because it's usually the first thing we do, and we get up and we go to the bathroom and we have a shower and we have coffee and all of that stuff. Don't even think about it. It's all pre-programmed, and that's 95% of our thoughts, isn't it? It's subconscious. And so if you're telling yourself negative things, what do you think the outcome of your life is going to be? And if in your subconscious 95% of the time you're saying to yourself, I'm no good, I can't do this, what's the point, I can't cope, why is everybody else able to do it and I can't, look at what they have, look at what I don't, all of that stuff that we say to ourselves, the kind of stuff we'd never say to anyone else, any other living human being, but we say it to ourselves. We look in the mirror, what do we say to ourselves? Some of that real vitriolic rubbish. And if you're saying that to yourself 95% of the time, what do you think the outcome is going to be? And you make it your truth, but it's not true. And I think that for me was the biggest turning point, was I'm telling myself this stuff and it simply isn't true. And yes, there's a bit around confidence that you have to work on in yourself. But again, it comes back to one of the teachings in iPEC around, actually, it's not necessarily, people are going to think about you what they think, and they're going to say about you what they say, but it's your response to that. That's only the only thing that we can control. So actually let them carry on and say what they're going to say. That's actually okay. And that was, again, another big turning point for me. And I think when you're in that state, and you're in that state where your inner thinking is really beginning to affect you negatively, they're the two key pieces, I think, is understanding that actually a lot of what you're saying to yourself isn't actually true, and then not letting other people affect you in the way that you do, because it's your choice in how you let them affect you. They're going to say what they're going to say anyway, and think what they think. Right. But it's up to you how you let it affect you.
And I'll kind of let everybody in on one of the secrets, as it were. It's not a secret. It's in the trailer. It's just that part of, so when we have our perception of how things have unfolded, it is just that. It's our perspective, and there's many other perspectives that are there. However, one of the things that we do, and specifically one of the ways that our mind works, is that it wants our perception of events to be exactly as it is. It wants it to be the truth, and that there to be no other explanation. And it does that for a very specific reason, which is that our minds do not like uncertainty, and they like control. And so it's just a mechanism by our minds to give us perceived control over what we see unfolding that we can't usually make sense of, or that we don't really want to spend too much time thinking about. And so it's just a pattern. And I think that's, again, so much of what you're describing, and what I know is part of the rest of the work, also inherent within the rest of the work that you do, is helping people understand that some of what we're going through and some of what we're unwiring, it's like don't take your thoughts personally, because in many instances, some of the thoughts that we have are just literally the way that the biology, the neurology works inside of us as human beings, the way our nervous systems work. And so sometimes we have some conditioning that's in there that was wired really, really, really long ago to keep us safe or to keep us in control, or the perception of control. You don't have to take those beliefs so personally at times. And when you can get that little bit of distance, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that one doesn't make much sense anymore. I don't want to use that. That's leading to terrible experiences. And
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to start weeding the garden and picking out the things that no longer belong there.
Right. I loved one of the concepts that we talked about before when we were getting ready for this interview about Harpreet, how you look at thoughts like their currency.
Yeah.
And what are the thoughts that we're saving and investing in, and what are the thoughts that are like depleting the bank account?
Yes.
And when we can wrap our minds around that, it really makes sense to be investing in thoughts that are going to align us where we want to go and be productive and be empowering and be what we want to think about, rather than just being at the effect of it.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share, how you help your clients take responsibility for their mental well-being and their mental health.
How I help them to, well, I mean, we've talked about the power of thought, of course, and so that's a really big key. And there's 6 pillars of my mental health program. We touch on power of thought and confidence, resilience, and self-mastery, self-care, and so there are 6 sort of pillars that form part of that, and there are key things that we can do to sort of help overcome some of that thinking. And so what I do, I do coach them, but I have certain exercises and things that I do, and I very much take from the fact that, and I'm not taking away from the excellent therapists and counselors and everything else that are out there.
Sure.
But one of the unique things about me is that when I train and I coach, I don't textbook train and coach. I do it from my own experience. I understand what it is like to be anxious and depressed and not sleeping and to be stressed and all of those things. And I also understand what it takes to go from feeling like that to where I am now, which is I'm happier now than I think I've ever been in my entire life, completely happy. And so, and yes, there are things that I still need to work on. And I shared with you when we were talking about in the pre-interview in terms of, there are still things that even me have to think about. Actually, is my thought serving me in this moment? And actually, is that really true? And, self-doubt creeps in all the time, in particular when you're working as a coach and you've got your own business and there's a lot of things that you have to do that you might not necessarily know, particularly if you're coming from corporate life like me. I've never run a business before, so I wasn't quite sure in terms of where I need to go, what I need to do next. So it is quite, it is a challenge, and self-doubt creeps in all the time, but it's always about coming back to, I have various practices that I do daily that help to keep me grounded, that help to make me realize actually, and obviously working with a coach, that actually sometimes it is just the way that I'm thinking and not necessarily what the actual state of play is. So, and I work with my clients in a similar way, in that we challenge some of that thinking based on my own experience, of course.
That's really beautiful. I think that a lot of coaches can relate to this feeling of, I'm a coach, so I should have this figured out. I shouldn't feel this way. These thoughts shouldn't be coming up for me. And it can feel really shameful, and to be able to bring our whole selves into our coaching practice is one of like the greatest gifts that we can give, using that empathy to be able to meet people where they're at and our own unique magic and, flavor to help them see what's possible is really exciting to hear about.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard as well, Jenny, when you're coming from from that corporate background, and we've been conditioned to be in a certain way. And because I'm still working in that background, I haven't quite stopped working completely just yet. But I've realized that even, when we think about sort of being versus doing versus having, and whenever people talk about be, do, have, and I'm a bit like, well, how do you just be? And I was when I took that time off work, because I didn't have any anything else that I was looking after. But I didn't quite get that concept of how do I just be? And I realized even in trying to just be, I was doing, because that's the only way I
yes.
Right? I have a whiteboard here, and I'm like, right, who do I need to be with a checklist? Who do I need to be this person that has this like really successful business? I need to be someone who does this and someone who does that. And it was a great big long list of things. And what I didn't realize is that I'm still doing. It was a to-do list, still doing. I wasn't actually just being true to myself, and just being, who I wanted to be and show up the way I wanted to in the world. And that has only come, I'll be honest with you, in the last probably 1 or 2 months, that I've stepped away and actually fully embraced, actually, this is who I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to stop doing things that I don't want to do. And if I'm doing some work and I don't want to be doing it, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I'm going to focus on just doing what I want to do and what I'm passionate about. And, things have happened in the last couple of months that I'm just a bit like, wow, I can't believe that since I've committed and I've stepped into that completely and I've just embraced who I am and unashamedly and being that person, the sort of synchronicities around that have been quite something.
Yeah, signs pointing to you saying you're on the right path. This is right.
Yes, yeah, and I had a bit of something happened a couple of weeks ago, which, if you don't mind me sharing, is a story.
I would love for you to share it.
Go for it.
Okay, so as we all do as potential, sort of business owners, when you become a coach, you start to think about, well, which direction do I want to go in, and you're not sure. So I've been focusing so much on trying to figure out what this thing was and what it looked like and what it needed to be and what it was going to be in 5 years' time, that I just got into my own head, as we do, coming from corporate background. I got into my own head. I was overthinking it, and I had like paralysis. I just stopped, and I was like, I don't know what to do next. I'm not quite sure. And again, like you said, coaches, we don't always have the answer. Sometimes, we have to look as well for those answers. And I went on this. It was a mindset conference for a few days, a virtual conference, and I actually took myself away because they'd kind of released some of the lockdown rules here, so I took myself away to an apartment just not far away from my house, just so I could get some time to really just be by myself, because I know that's what I need. So I took that time, did the conference, fantastic. The day after the conference ended, I stayed an extra day because I knew I wanted to just sort of really consolidate what I'd learned. And I'd woken up really early in the morning, and I got up and I went for a walk. And I didn't really know this area very well. And so it's just before 6 in the morning, nobody around. I'd seen one man who'd gone ahead in front of me a long time ago. I don't know which direction he'd gone in, but I carried on, and I come to this, it's like a rock face. And it was about 1,600 feet, so it's quite high, and there was a rocky sort of path up this rock face. I was not wearing appropriate footwear because I hadn't realised I'd be my walking shoes. So I was wearing like Skechers, like walking Skechers, not the best for climbing. And so I start this climbing this path, and I was looking up at how far it was, and I thought, my gosh, I'm never going to get there. It's really quite tough. I'm not the fittest of people, really out of breath. And it was quite slippy, and about halfway up I slipped and I landed like on my hands, and I just went, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I looked up, and I thought, it's still quite a way to go, and it's quite steep. I looked down, and I thought, I don't think this is the way down because it's too treacherous. There must be another way down at the other side. What do I do? I'm effectively stuck here. See, what I was telling myself, I'm stuck here. Reality is I wasn't, but that's what I told myself. I'm stuck here. What do I do? So I'm looking around, and I was like, I need to figure out where to put my foot because I kept slipping. There was nowhere stable to put it. And as I was looking, I noticed a patch of sand next to one of the rocks, and there was no sand up there. So it really was a tiny little patch, and there was a fresh footprint in that sand. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, one of the learnings from the conference was stop worrying about the how I'm going to get there, just focus on the next right step. And I almost chuckled to myself, and I went, that's the next right step.
Literally right there.
The way up this thing. And I smiled to myself, and so I put my foot where that footprint went, and of course it was stable, so I was able to carry on going. And as I was going up from that moment on, I didn't look up again once. I just focused on the next right step. I just need to take the next right step. And I saw the odd footprint, not many, on the way up there. Got up there, fantastic view, really beautiful. meditated up there for a bit, and then I had to make my way down. And I thought, I don't know where the way down is. Where do I go? And it was quite narrow at the top. And so I kind of walked towards where the land was a bit flatter, and I saw another footprint in a little patch of sand. And I thought, that's the way down. This is the way down. I'm being shown the next right step. So I followed that step, and then the way down was quite treacherous, and I had to go through a wood, and you couldn't see where the bottom of the wood was, where the floor was, and I landed on my backside twice. And on the second time, I couldn't see where the footing was, so I did fall. On the second time round, I actually laughed out loud to myself. And I thought, this is hilarious. If only I could get myself stuck up here. I don't know if I'm going the right way. I haven't seen a footstep for ages. I'm just going to go with my intuition. I'm just going to go with my gut, and I'm just going to focus on that next right step. And so I did, and I got through the wood bit into a clearing, and then I saw another footprint in a bit of sand, and I thought, I came the right way. I just trusted myself, and I came the right way. Where's the learning here? And on the way home, and I was quite high up, so this beautiful walk back to the car, and I thought to myself, the learning here is that I need to stop worrying about the destination, and I need to stop worrying about the journey on how to get there, and I just need to focus on the next right step. Right? I've come into this just being who I am and letting everything else go. That's all I need to focus on, is that, and trust my intuition that and take the next right step, and that path will become clear to me as I start to do it. And since that, and it's only 2 weeks ago, as I said, things have started to move. I came back that day and I completely mapped out a different direction for my business, which I'm now working on. But it came to me after that whole journey. So yeah, the learning is every day is a school day. It really is. Never stops. It's lifelong learning.
Yeah, I love that story.
You know what you just highlighted again. I don't know whether you were intending to or not, but that part of your journey began by taking time off, meaning creating space for yourself. In this journey, in this last example of taking the time to, go for this additional conference, getting some side, from getting outside to have some space on your own, and then taking extra space after the event to be able to get some integration time of what was it that I actually heard and what does this mean to me, and then having a literal experience to quite show you the way of that. But the reason why I highlighted is just, it's so, again, symptomatic of what we tend not to do, is that we don't tend to take space. We tend to stay on the hamster wheel. We keep trying to tread water. We don't give ourselves those moments to be able to actually take a rest and see what bubbles back to the surface, see what it is that we can let go of, see what it is that integrates in a different way. And when we get that space and we have some patience with it, that's when, Harpreet, I think what you're illustrating so well is I think that's when we connect at a deeper level to our intuition, because intuition can't speak through crowded thoughts. It's a very small, subtle little voice that comes through for us that is usually some of the greatest, consciousness and wisdom that we can connect to. You can't do that unless you have space. It doesn't come through.
I quite agree. And I think for all those years, if I just listened to my intuition, and I knew I always had a strong intuition because my gut was always, it's never wrong. It's always has served me well. But it, like you said, it was crowded out by all the stuff I kept myself busy with, all the doing that I thought I had to do because I needed to be like everybody else. So, I really had that in sort of my mind. And it's really interesting you say that. It's true. Even now, even having gone through the iPEC journey and coaching and helping others, I still have those moments where even my intuition can't get through. And I realized I've been waking up early now for the last few months. And I think, again, it was sort of on my intuition's way of saying, actually, if you get up and just be with yourself in the morning, particularly during lockdown, because I'm homeschooling as well as working. So, it's full on from 7 a.m. in this house. And so actually just waking up a little bit earlier and having that time to myself, that's when my best work comes through. That's when my best thoughts come through. It really is where I'm mostly in touch with that kind of higher self and that intuition. And it's weird. I don't even have to ask, it just comes. I can't explain it. I'm not a massively religious person. I'm fairly spiritual, and I was before iPEC, but since going through that journey, absolutely. And I've started to listen to it a bit more. It has absolutely sent me in the right direction. It's just about trusting yourself, I guess.
So where are things headed now with the Mental Wealth Academy and how you will be serving your clients?
That's a really good question. So in terms of I had always worked on self-leadership, but I hadn't really talked about self-regulation and the professional development piece. So that's kind of what I'm working on now, particularly post-COVID. There is a mental health tsunami that is coming. Not just from people working on the front line, from the things that they've had to endure, but actually all of us that have been at home and all the people that have had to put themselves at risk, all of that. There's a lot that's gonna, there's a lot of people that don't have good coping mechanisms because we've not been taught this stuff. We're not taught how to deal with such strong emotions when we're younger, and certainly even when I grew up, I wasn't taught how to deal with strong feelings and emotions. I was taught to suppress them. I think a lot of people they're not taught to actually how to process and deal with them. And so there's going to be a lot that's been bubbling under the surface, but because we've been in crisis mode for 2 months, people might not necessarily be aware that actually they're bubbling under the surface.
Yeah.
And I think going back to normality, whatever that is for us, both sides of the pond, we don't know when that will be or what that will look like. There's going to be a lot of people that are suddenly hit by, all these things that I used to employ, all these coping mechanisms that I used to have, they don't work anymore. That's what happened to me. I used to motivate and inspire myself by push myself harder, work longer hours. And that's what I'd always done until at one point my body just went, not doing that anymore. Actually, I don't like doing what I don't like you forcing me to do things I don't want to do, so I'm not going to. And that's effectively what happened for me. And I worry how many more people will fall victim of that because they've actually, the coping mechanisms that they have in place aren't necessarily the most healthy. And so that will all come undone as we all try and go back to normality. And I think there's going to be some sort of lockdown for some time to come. I think we'll be in and out, until we have vaccines, until we have a cure. I think, potentially we might be in and out. And so that's quite hard going psychologically for all of us. So yeah, I think there is a tsunami coming. And there's different ways that we can try and address some of this. And yes, it's the self-leadership piece, but actually it's also being able to handle mental health conversations in the workplace.
Yes.
Because I think it's not necessarily, we have mental health first aid over here in the UK, which is great and it has its place, but for some people it's just about, if you can spot something, it's about just being able to know what to say. If somebody says something to you or you suspect that there's a problem, it's just knowing the first question to ask. Most of the time you'll be referring to professional help anyway, but it's just being able to have that conversation in the first place and feeling confident enough to do so. So my work at the moment is taking me around that. So that
yes, beautiful.
That's excellent.
It's really exciting. Yeah,
it's interesting because Harpreet, again, the way that you describe that, it's that if we can find a way of creating the container, creating the space for individuals to have that type of conversation, what it does is it creates a space of safety and acceptance that people can walk into. And I'll just simply say from personal experience with clients, colleagues, and everything else, that at times is significantly more important than any of the solutions that follow. Meaning just that ability to have that safe place, to feel a level of acceptance, to feel like I'm not in this alone, that already begins a healing process that is so fundamentally important. And the fact that we aren't having those conversations is creating distance between where I feel I am presently and how far that safe place or that trusted space feels like it is. It's critically important to get those conversations out in public.
Oh, completely. And I think there's two pieces of this. There's the piece around people feeling able to talk about things without that fear of stigma, without that fear of recrimination and judgment. And then there's the piece around actually when they've shared it with you, what do you say to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's both sides. And I think there's going to need to be more work done on both sides so that people feel able to say, actually, do you know what? I'm not, things aren't all as they seem. Yeah. But as we sort of said right at the beginning, a lot of this is self-awareness and being aware that you're, and being able to admit that there is actually a problem in the first place. That's the hardest, I think, of all.
Curious for both of your perspectives on this, because what just popped into mind with the way that you described that was having a conversation with a friend the other day around grief and the different responses that individuals have to grief. And in many ways, we're actually going through a significant level of grieving right now Mostly it unfortunately is very repressed as well. That said, the conversation we were having is that when people are in a grieving process, the person who then has seen that or witnessed that, very often, because we're so uncomfortable with grief, like we're uncomfortable with the conversation you're describing, things will be said to try to ameliorate, to make it better, to give somebody hope. Oh, no, it's okay, that this too shall pass. When really these are just words to try to make ourselves feel better. And that in those moments that you're witnessing grief, or you're witnessing somebody's going through and talking about this for themselves, at times, even just being able to say, listen, thank you so much for the courage that you have had in what it is that you've shared. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm willing to stand here and be present with you and figure it out and find a way to get this to move forward, even if I don't have a clue how to be that person for you, as opposed to what can be a more typical response, which is, oh, you'll get through this. Oh, it's okay. Oh, I know somebody who's been through this, so it's probably going to be like this, which are all just words that we use to make ourselves feel better and have nothing to do with the person who's sharing the experience that they're going through. And I'm just curious for both of you, what your reactions are to that, or what your experience has been.
Well, for me, just having the space to clear has been an important tool that I've been practicing, and that I use with the groups that I work with, to just clear out what your experience is without any problem solving.
Yeah.
And just pure expression of what you're experiencing in your mind and your body and your emotions and your energy, and allowing it to sit and be witnessed by someone else with no other response, even other than, I see you and I hear you, and it's okay to feel this, has been tremendously healing, not only for myself, but for other women who I work with.
I'd agree with that. Exactly. I think I get asked, excuse me, I get asked a lot of, I don't know how to speak to or deal with people that are having some sort of, and I've experienced it myself. When the people I did confide in didn't know what to say to me. They were a bit like, I don't really get mental health, so like, get that you're struggling. But
Right.
yeah, I'm just a bit like, get over it and get on with it. I had very close people to me say that. And it was very hard actually not to take that personally. And even when you're in grief and you share, sort of how you're feeling with somebody, you expect, to sort of almost a little bit of sympathy back, or empathy, or whichever one it is. So I would agree with you. Actually, I always say this. I said most people want, if they're opening up to you, just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen without judgment, because that's effectively most of the time what people want. They just want you to listen and say exactly what you said, Jenny.
Yeah.
I hear you, I see you. And I also say, just actually ask them what they want. That's okay as well, in terms of, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Do you want to talk about this? Do you want me to talk about? Should we talk about something else? It's just that, and they will tell you what they need. And actually, a lot of people don't ask those questions because, as I said, it's usually very don't really know what to do with this. Really awkward, particularly for the Brits. Really awkward. Don't know what to say. Let's just try and say, oh, you'll be okay. Yeah, everything will be fine. Let's change the subject. Let's talk about the weather. So there's a lot of that. And I think it is just sitting in that moment in the present and saying, I hear you. I see you. And, what can I do for you? How can I help?
Yeah,
what do you need?
Absolutely. Radical listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Listening very, very deeply, and allowing anything personal to just sit to the side and holding that space for that person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And allowing them, like you said, to just offload.
Yeah.
And clear all of that out, because a lot of the time that's what you need, is just to clear it all out.
Yeah. This has been such a beautiful conversation. We're coming to the end of our time today, but for those who are tuning in live or watching the replay, this will actually be on Facebook, on the iPEC coaching Facebook page. So if anybody wants to continue the conversation in the comments, please feel free. This is only the beginning. This is meant to be a space where we can explore these types of concepts and this type of energy. And our intent is to hold the space for all of you too. So Harpreet, thank you so much for joining us today on the Energy Explorer series and for sharing all of you so graciously. Jordan is going to be sharing some links on how to get in touch with Harpreet if you would like to learn more about what she's doing. If anyone has logistics questions about how to be a part of the iPEC coach community and become a certified professional coach, we actually have an amazing admissions team who will offer you a space to explore what it would mean for you to become a coach. It's actually a part of our admissions process for you to receive coaching to explore this for yourself. So we're going to be posting the information if you're ready to have that conversation to go ahead and sign up. So we are actually also excited because we have a new program called The Power of Choice that's kicking off tomorrow. And we're going to be exploring more about the different energy levels and the awareness that we can create to be at the power of choice in our lives. Today is the last day to register. So Jordan will be posting the link for that if anyone wants to tune in and sign up. And for everyone who is joining us here today, Jordan will also be sending out a replay from this recording, which has been so powerful. And I'm personally going to go back and listen to it again because it's been really impactful for me. So Luke, Harpreet, thank you so much for joining us today on the Energy Explorer series. And we will see you all next time. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Check out iPEC's coach training program at ipeccoaching.com/OIA. And of course, to find out about all the conversations, events, gatherings, all the things that we've got upcoming, then head on over to oneideaaway.com/community. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please do us the favor of subscribing, reviewing the show, as well as sharing insights or comments that stood out for you in this episode.